Okay, so just in a continuation from the last video, instead of just making it a quick 15 minutes, I figured I would make a couple of them. Convection. Learned about this last week. It's going to be a transfer of heat and solutes by circulation or movement of a liquid. You then have solvent drag, which are going to be solutes that move across a semipermeable membrane, and it's going to bring smaller solutes with it. And this picture is just depicting how ultrafiltration is being, how it works, and then how different solutes are transported in that. So there's several different forces that affect the flow of fluid in the tubing. And when we're talking about tubing, we're talking about the blood tubing. This is going to be when the blood is taken from the patient, going through the machine. There's different forces that are going to affect that. One is going to be the flow rate. So that's going to be the fluid that flows through at any point in time. That's how fast or how slow we decide to run the machine. The machine is the one that's going to be pulling the blood out through different forces. The faster the flow, the more diffusion is going to work, the cleaner the person's blood is going to be. So flow velocity is going to measure how fast the fluid travels through the tubing. It's going to be based on the flow rate and then the size of the tube. Now the tubes, I think I showed you in orientation, they're fairly decent sized, bigger than a straw, but again, they're not gigantic where we're pulling tons and tons of fluid at one time. There's also resistance. When you think of anything that's going to be narrower, it's going to be more pressure is going to be there to pull all of that extra blood through. So resistance is a friction or narrow area in the tube that slows the flow. So most of the tubing that you can see on the blood tubing is all going to be the exact same size. There isn't going to be any difference, and there shouldn't be any restriction at all. The next thing we're going to talk about is different fluid compartments, and I did touch on this briefly, so now we'll get into it a little bit more. So the body's job is to constantly keep this equilibrium by moving solutes and water from different spaces until they're the same. So fluid and solutes can only be removed in the bloodstream in dialysis. And this is really, really important to remember because you're going to have patients that are going to come in that, and I know it's going to sound strange, but think that they can lose weight by taking off extra fluid. And I think we talked about this, at least in one of our sessions, that water weight and all of that extra, the weight that some people think that they can lose by taking off extra fluid. Well, we all need fluid. We all need to keep our cells hydrated. Those in dialysis will have extra fluid at all times only because they're not excreting or eliminating that extra fluid, which is why we're going to be getting a pre-weight and a post-weight to see how much fluid has been taken off at any time. But important to know, fluid and solutes can only be removed from the bloodstream in dialysis. So if it's in a different space, it's not going to work. And I'll show you what some of those look like. So you can see here, this is intracellular. So breaking down the word, it's going to be space inside the cells, basically. And where the arrow is pointing is where that space is going to be. You then have extracellular, which is going to be the space outside the cells. And then interstitial, which is going to be the space located in between the cells. And the one that you're going to be most concerned about, intravascular. So intravascular, it's going to be pertaining to like within the vascular space. So it's going to be the space inside the blood vessels. This is the only area that fluid can be pulled in dialysis. So even if somebody comes in with all of this extra edema, that swelling in their legs, in their face, hands, wherever it might be, if it's not in the intravascular space, we won't be able to pull it. It has to be in the bloodstream. And there really isn't any way to find out where that fluid is. And you'll learn more about it as we get to the lab portion. I feel like I say that all the time. But you'll be seeing how we set the machines. Different indications the patient will show that they can't handle the treatment, which would make us to believe that maybe it's not in the right space. Next, we're going to move on to the different components in the hemodialysis system, as well as the extracorporeal blood circuit. And these you're pretty familiar with, only because some of them we've touched on in the last learning plan. So just a couple components: dialyzer, dialysate, arterial and venous blood tubing, heparin pump, and blood flow meters. So what we're starting out with here is the dialyzer or hemodialyzer. They're the same. Artificial kidney. These are just pictures of what they look like. You can see on the top here, you're going to have the arterial end, and then this is going to be the venous end. So when blood comes in, it's going to be coming into this top port here. Actually, the top port here, sorry. And it's going to flow all the way down through the dialyzer here, which is where it's actually getting cleaned. And then it's going to be removed out this side. Then at the same time that the blood is flowing from top to bottom, you're going to have your dialysate. Oh, sorry about that. That wasn't my intention. Then you're going to have your dialysate that's going to come into this bottom port right here, and it's going to flow this way. So it's going to flow from bottom to top, countercurrent flow. And again, you can see here all the tiny little hair-like fibers. That's where the blood is flowing inside. Dialysate will flow on the outside. Okay, so like you learned already, artificial kidney is the dialyzer. It removes most of the excess fluid and waste. It's going to help maintain electrolytes and control the body pH level. Unable to produce hormones that the kidney makes. So definitely not a perfect process, but something is better than nothing. So how they work, again, this is just a review, but it's composed of thousands of tiny, semi-permeable, again, hollow fibers contained in a plastic case. So the case has 2 ports for dialysate and blood flow in and out. Inside the hollow fibers is where the blood compartment is located. Outside of the fibers is where the dialysate compartment is located. It's used as a filter to remove waste and fluid from the blood. Fibers are made of this cellulosic and synthetic materials. Within the dialyzer is where diffusion and ultrafiltration occur. And of course, a prescription is needed for the size of the dialyzer and how fast the blood will flow, as well as everything else pretty much. The design, again, this is review from last learning plan, but the blood and dialysate must never mix. Occasionally honestly, I've seen this one time, and luckily the patient survived, but it really was a process to get them back to the way they should be. But shortness of breath, chest pain, because their blood mixed, they coughed up a lot of foamy sputum. So then they were just given some acid and bicarbonate, more bicarbonate, to try to counteract the effects of the acid. And important again, countercurrent flow. Want to remember that dialysate flows around the fibers from bottom to top, so opposite of what the blood flows. And you can take a look at these again. These are just going to be exactly what you learned about before. Okay, you'll want to remember about effectiveness of the dialyzer. This is something that we talked about last learning plan, but you're going to keep seeing it over and over. You're going to hear the term clearance quite often. It's a test of how well the dialyzer is working. Not only the dialyzer, but also how well we're cleaning the patient's blood. So that is important to know. You'll see clearance quite often. Okay, next we're going to be talking about the dialysate delivery systems, which again, review, meaning that they're important to know about. So it's going to prepare and deliver dialysate to the dialyzer. Some units, like you learned about, is going to be for a single patient, and others will be for multiple different stations at one time. Lots of accessory equipment, so there's going to be safety devices on all the machines, blood tubing, blood pump, heparin infusion pump, and monitor. Dialysate, remember there's multiple names for it, bath, acid. Dialysate is on one side of the dialyzer while blood is on the other. Definitely a key phrase to know and concept to understand. So it's going to assist in removing the waste as well as an extra amount of electrolytes from the blood. It's also going to replace different substances like calcium, and some can keep potassium equal, as well as bicarbonate that a patient is going to need. So you'll want to remember the calcium bicarbonate. Okay, we've talked about the flow of dialysate probably way too many times now, but you understand that it's important. Okay, and the dialysate itself, why it's important. Water, I believe, is the next learning plan. It's going to be, remember, it's definitely ultra clean. So not sterile, but getting close to the purest mark as possible because the patient is exposed to so much of it. So water used to make dialysate must meet, we call it AAMI, AAMI standards. Needs to have a microbial count of less than 200 colony forming units. While the endotoxin then, which are also bad, need to be less than 2 endotoxin units. You'll learn more about that in the next learning plan. These are different things that are used with dialysate or found in the dialysate. And then again, going through the different components of it: sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, chloride, glucose, bicarbonate, citrate, and definitely the importance of dialysate verification. So again, a lot of this is just review from the last learning plan, but it's going to just continue on to be building from these concepts here in conductivity. Okay, flow rate has to do with the machine itself. This is going to be a flow pump that controls the rate of dialysate that's flowing to the dialyzer, again prescribed by a nephrologist. And the efficiency is improved with increased flow rates up to 800 milliliters per minute. So what this is showing here is actually a blood pump, which is going to be turning continuously, moving the blood through these tubings. This is where it's showing what the blood flow rate is going to be, just on one of the Phoenix machines that Aspirus currently uses, but is going to a new machine. And so all these are going to be touch screen. Very nice machines. The new ones will be like that too, but it'll be kind of exciting to go through those different features. Blood leak detector. So there is a detector to make sure that a blood leak doesn't occur. And if one does occur, it alarms, clamps the venous line. And then what happens is that technician would go up to the machine and using a hemostix would check the drain to make sure there isn't any blood found. And we'll go through that as well. pH is important to know. It's a measure of how acidic or how alkaline a solution is. So acidic is going to be the acid, alkaline is going to be the base. Dialysate needs to have a pH close to that what of the blood range is. So the range is between 7 and 7.4. pH is tested prior to each treatment. And again, it's with that Phoenix meter that I talked about, and then you're comparing the two with the machine. So the lower the pH, meaning if we're going down to, so it goes up to a scale of, it goes up higher and higher and higher, like we'll say 10, 11, 12, 13, that's going to be more alkaline, while the lower numbers, like anything below 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, that's going to be more acidic. We don't want any air in any of our devices, so this is a de-aeration device. Water and microbubbles are removed this way. There isn't really a very good picture because all the machines are so different, or I would have showed you. Air detector, you learned about the last one as well. And then it's important to know the differences between kidney and dialysis. Just look through this and make sure that you're understanding the differences, because there are some major differences, and our body can't produce hormones when our kidneys aren't functioning. So make sure you want to know that information. All right. That's the end of this lesson. If you have any questions, let me know.